Okay, so welcome to Trusted Teachers, being the support that we needed. Today's video is a computing related video. As always, I'm joined by Mr. B.
Hello everyone.
Hello Mr. B. Today we're going to talk about security. We're going to look at one area in particular, and that's an area of firewalls and what firewalls are. So it's computer security. There's going to be two videos. One will look at firewalls and one will look at encryption. What we're looking for today is to think about what cybercrime may be and how we can protect ourselves from cyber threats, and look at the role of the firewall and explain how firewalls work in terms of packet inspection and IP filtering. So we'll have a look at all of those things. Before we go any further, Mr. B, could you maybe, what's your understanding of the phrase cybercrime or cyber attack?
So cyber crimes, like any crime that takes place over the internet, so it could be like stealing people's details and using that as for identity theft reasons.
Yep.
It could be hacking into someone's computer, accessing information without being told you can. What was a cyber attack?
Yeah, cyber attacks.
Is that like a specific, you've targeted a computer or a computer system for a specific reason, maybe to get a specific piece of information or to implant a virus? So there's like a reason behind it?
All of the above, what you just said, really kind of does sum up the whole concept of cyber attack and cyber crimes. So cybercrime, a cybercrime is an attack launched by cyber criminals against a single or multiple computers or networks. So it could be directed towards an individual, you or I, just sitting at home, or it could be directed towards a business network. A cyber attack can maliciously disable computers, steal data, or use a breach computer as a launch point for other attacks. And things we talk about, distributed denial of service attacks and zombie computers. But we're not looking at those specifically today. So yeah, cybercrime is not Cybermen, Doctor Who Nemesis, which I found the scariest as a child. But it's not that type of cyber attack. It's you're quite correct. It's one that's launched over the internet using computers. Cyber attacks, you only have to look at one of the many cyber attack maps to see how many attempts there are to gain unauthorized access to computers around the world. And this is just a screenshot from FireEye, but most of the security software vendors produce maps like this live online, and they're absolutely fascinating to watch, quite hypnotic. But it'll show you some of the stats and some of the figures, and literally hundreds of thousands per hour and millions per day of cyber attacks. So it's a big problem and a growing problem. Cybercrime continues to rise in scale and complexity, affecting essential services, business and private individuals alike, and some of them have made news headlines. Cybercrime costs the UK billions of pounds, causes untold damage and threatens national security. So it's a really big problem, and you probably saw the government adverts about people retraining in cyber, because there's going to be such a demand and need for professionals who can guard against cybercrime and cyber attacks. Okay, so this is a really kind of nice slide. This sums up what can happen, some of the downsides. I think Mr. B, you mentioned identity theft. The cybercrime can attack people's banking transactions. Again, a bit like identity theft, the theft of credit card details. Blackmailing ransomware has been in the news quite a lot. The violation of the law, if computers get used to send out spam, so taking over someone's computer and using it as a platform for other attacks, that DOS that we mentioned. And for businesses, potential breaking the law, data loss, and companies can be fined lots of money. 4% of the global GDP as a maximum if they don't take all reasonable precautions to protect data. Reduced productivity, it takes a long time to investigate cyber threats and cyber crimes. So there's lots of negative impacts for companies and individuals alike. Two main methods we can use to protect ourselves. They are firewalls and encryption, and today we'll just look at firewalls. Now, Mr. B, another question for yourself. It's a few tricky questions today. Can you remember how we can tell computers apart on the internet, how we can identify individual computers, what system we use?
Just look for their IP address.
That's exactly what we're looking at, the IP address. That is one of the things that we're just going to touch upon in a moment. A firewall serves as a barrier that ensures only good traffic gets in and out of computers or computer systems, and it does this by identifying trusted traffic and untrusted traffic. A firewall is all about preventing unauthorized access to computer systems, and you mentioned that, Mr. B, that unauthorized access. 1.7 million cybercrimes a year in the UK was last year's figure. The two main methods used by firewalls are IP filtering, so that's your internet protocol, that's your IP address, and packet inspection. So what do we mean by IP addresses and packet inspection? All data sent over computer networks, whether it be a file, music, video, is sent as a series of small data packets. And you can see there we have the destination IP address and the source IP address, plus the payload, the data that we need in there. And the two main methods that it works is we can look at the IP addresses, that's the IP filtering, and we can set up lists that will allow certain IP addresses through and block other ones. Or we can look at the payload and look at what that data packet is doing, and that's the packet filtering idea. So as well as the actual data, its payload, a data packet also contains lots of information about the sender and the receiver. And a firewall can inspect every packet of data entering and exiting a computer network, and they can look at the destination IP address or the sender IP address. And we can program firewalls with their rules, so we can create an allowed list, a group of safe IP addresses that will be allowed through, or a denied list, a group of banned IP addresses. So we're looking at the IP address and we're filtering out safe ones and not safe ones. So that's IP filtering, and that's one method used by firewalls. The other method is the packet inspection, where we're looking at that payload part, and a firewall will have various lists and rules to decide whether or not to let data through. It will also inspect the contents, the payload, looking for banned keywords or common virus code. We can restrict access to different ports, and we can also set up to block specific domain names. So we're looking for the payload, and that's why we call it the packet inspection, and we can use certain rules again to block harmful data. Okay, so just to summarize, firewalls use IP filtering and packet inspection. That's the two methods they use, where they look at the IP address or they look at the contents of the packet, and they're looking for banned IP addresses, banned keywords, etc. They're usually built into computers' operating systems, and if you're running a Windows computer, that's Windows Defender. Indeed, much of the updates that you do whenever you power up or power down your computer is Windows Defender being updated. They can also be purchased as a part of a security suite, so the big companies like Norton and McAfee contain a number of pieces of software to prevent any kind of malware, such as viruses, affecting your computer. Okay, so that was Trusted Teachers being the support that we needed with another computing video. Thanks for listening.
Can I ask me a question?
Oh yes, absolutely. I should have asked.
Is that how like schools would stop pupils going on something that was like inappropriate for them? So like the firewall in terms of the keywords and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. In schools, what we do is we buy in a firewall, and it's already populated with banned keywords and banned IP addresses. It will have a denied list or an allowed list. So that's exactly the method that's used in school to protect young people from harmful content. And that idea can be taken just into the world of business or your own home, and how you protect your own home computer or a business network from harmful content. It may be different harmful content, but the principle is exactly the same. Allowed lists, denied lists, IP filtering, or packet inspection.
And is it not true that in China they have like the opposite? So like everything's banned and you have to like unlock things. Is that not true?
It is called the Great Firewall of China. So they've set up a firewall and basically restrict all of the internet, and then they only allow through what the government deems as being appropriate for the individuals. So it's an extreme form of censorship, and it's firewalls that are used to implement that censorship.
Thank you, Mr. C.
Okay, thank you, Mr. B, and thanks everyone else for listening.